bringing the arcade into your home. And I don't mean the smell of cigarettes and sticky carpets. Now, back in June, I found myself with a couple of hours to kill up in New Brighton. And I thought, I'm standing outside an arcade, so let's go and see what we've got inside one of these places today. I know it's going to be disappointing. And well, gone are all the rows of arcade machines and the full motion cabinets of things like Outrun. Obviously, that was 40 years ago. But you would have thought there'd still be a few video games around, and no, not really. It's all coin pushers and just things designed to extract money from you. There are some games around, like this dinosaur game here, but hey, it's hardly cutting-edge graphics, is it? Even this Pac-Man machine here, well, it isn't really Pac-Man, is it? So I got thinking about my own experiences of arcades and the games that I first saw in the arcade that I then purchased for the home systems. And we're going to start off with Space Harrier, and I know I've mentioned this one before, Clarence Pier in Southsea. I first saw this full motion version. Yeah, it was parked up for a couple of weeks before they turned it on, and then there were queues. Oh, the queues. 50p for 9 lives, 20p for 3 lives. And there'd always be a crowd of people around this game when it first came out, and I was taken by it. I really, really was. This was like nothing else. Mind-blowing graphics and sound. The cabinet moved as you moved the joystick. You'd see nothing like it. So of course, obviously, I wanted the home version for my Amstrad CPC. And on my birthday, early in the morning before school, I loaded the disc up and, well, this is what I was faced with. A vector graphic approximation of Space Harrier. The loading screen promised a lot because it looked like the arcade, wow. But obviously, that's the loading screen. You get into the game and, well, you have the music, and demonstrably, on the first level, you have the same enemy patterns pretty much as the arcade, although it's very crude. Now, all these years later, you realise the reason it's crude is to keep the speed up and to keep it playable, and actually, it is very playable. Although you can't shoot the scenery, you do have to dodge the trees on level 1, which does make it quite hard until you work out the motion that kind of ensures the graphics or the trees won't spawn in front of you. If you kind of go to the left a bit, then they always come to your right, and so on. That said, I was quite pleased with it. And obviously my mate was taken with my copy of Space Harrier because he bought on budget a few years later the Commodore 64 version. And oh my. Now, people would be saying, well, actually, you need to show the USA version because that's improved. That's not the version we had. On all these videos today, I'm going to be showing the Spectrum, Commodore and Amstrad versions of the game because these are the ones that would have been around at the time, right? I know there's other versions. It kind of tries to be Space Harrier, but it's just too crude. But it just doesn't have the fluidity of the Amstrad version. Speaking of which, the Spectrum version, which kind of... because it lacks the music, because there's no 128K version, it really just doesn't connect to the arcade, which is a shame because the graphics are a bit better than the Amstrad version, and it's got a bit of speed, but it never quite manages to really convince you it's related to the arcade. A real shame. Incidentally, I'm not covering the ST and Amiga versions, but they don't play great either. As an Amstrad owner, I was probably best off with the version I had, even though it's a crude approximation. Now, there was another game that I got for that birthday, and it was Outrun, which was right next to the Space Harrier machine in Clarence Pier. And again, you load the game up, and I had it on disc, and I loaded it up at the same time that morning before school. And wow, you look at that and go, it's Outrun, it's got the music, and it's going to be brilliant. And oh dear. Yes, it's a static screenshot, this probe conversion of Outrun from US Gold. It looks fine until it starts to judder along. The road is the same colour as the grass or whatever. The levels do split apart at the end of each level, as you'd expect. I'm using a cheat here. There's only one type of car on each level, which is peculiar. But and if you have a tape version, you're going to be doing a massive multi-load. On disc, it's a few seconds. You get to the checkpoint, it loads the next bit in, and you carry on. But on tape, oh dear. And there's no sound apart from some beeps. Part of the Outrun experience is the tune that goes on the entire time. And that fantastic soundtrack, which you do get on the Spectrum version. And the Spectrum version does suffer from the only one type of car on each section that the Amstrad version does. And it's clearly the same engine, but it does move a bit better. Again, the road does split off in a quite messy fashion, but at least it feels a bit more like Outrun. Commodore 64. I didn't see this version till many years later. And again, it starts off well. You think, oh, look at this. The road is flashing to try and give the impression of movement. And like the Spectrum, decent soundtrack. Incidentally, all three 8-bit versions came with a cassette of the arcade soundtrack, which was probably a sop to Amstrad owners for their silent version. But on the 64, it's just too messy. It's just too messy and kind of unplayable. It's a shame, because all three of these versions have a little bit of promise, but it was rushed for Christmas. Buggy Boy, the first time I ever saw this was on my mate's Commodore 64 rather than the arcade, although I did seek out the arcade version. Again, quite near the front, as I recall, at Clarence Pier in Southsea, after having played the C64 version. Another conversion by Elite like Space Harrier. And this, of course, was an arcade game with massive sprites and a big sit-down. I assume there was an upright cabinet as well. I just remember the big sit-down cabinet. And on the C64, you're not getting massive sprites. What you are getting is an absolutely fantastic game. It's related to the arcade game, but actually it's trying to take advantage of the 64's strengths. And if you start trying to analyse that you're supposed to be doing over 200 kilometres an hour, then yeah, and the fact when you turn on a corner, it makes no difference because you're going around the corner anyway. None of this matters because this is just great fun. It's just great fun, and it's a score of attack game. It really is. This isn't a traditional racing game. It's a game where you see how large a score you can get, racking up the flag scores and all the little ones you go underneath, and all the bonuses. And yeah, you know, you can't always avoid the obstacles when they come around the corner. But and the graphics, you know, some of them are crude. It doesn't matter. It's just enormous fun. It really is. And just that arcade kind of, the arcade noises, all that stuff. It just kind of ticks all the boxes of what you want on your 8-bit. An approximation of the arcade that just kind of gives you the feeling that of what you're doing. That, you know, if you're going to play the real thing, you go to the arcade. Today, what you do is load up MAME. But this is something of its own. I love it. I really do love it on the C64. The Spectrum version tries to go for the full arcade experience with massive sprites. And if you're a fan of the arcade, you might like this, although, yeah, draw distances aren't good. It's really great to see the massive sprite, but it just chunks along a little bit too much. And fun, it lacks that fun factor the C64 version has. Yeah, the C64 has tiny sprites, but it doesn't matter. And what are you going to get on the Amstrad? Are you going to get the Spectrum version or the C64 version? Nice loading screen. And what you get on the Amstrad is the C64 version. And it plays okay. What it's using is that 4-colour palette thing on the sprites to make them faster for redrawing. Somebody else can explain it. I think someone explained it in the comments of the original Buggy Boy video when I reviewed it years ago. The problem is having all the kind of game sprites in 4 colours means that you can't tell what colour the flags are for the bonuses. So it's just kind of, yeah, you can't just kind of try and collect them all in order or anything because they all look the same. And everything looks very blue. That said, if you put that aside, it does play pretty much the same as the C64 version. And I swapped this with a mate because he wanted my copy of Crazy Cars 2, which would never load on my 6128. There's something with the tape made it very difficult to load. I swapped that for a budget copy of Buggy Boy, and I enjoyed it. Did I enjoy it as much as my mate's C64 version? No, I didn't, but I would never have let him know that at the time. WEC Lemans, or WEC Lemans, which was another game up front at Clarence Pier, with a big car that you sat in like Outrun. And a slightly different style of graphics. A smooth, I don't know how you explain it. They just look different from Outrun. Very different style. Not better, just different. And it was a more hardcore racing game than Outrun. Outrun was very much about the experience. WEC Lemans was more an out-and-out racer. Oh, that'll upset some people. When it came to the home systems, here's the Spectrum version looking very authentic to the arcade. It's got those kind of very stylised... Is it stylised? I don't know. The cars. The cars just look like no other racing game at that time. And it doesn't have music when you go along. It's about just getting the best time in to get, I think it's 4 laps of the course. You need to slow down for the corners and just get your angles right on the corners and just get past the obstacles. Some people may say it's quite samey, but it's really about getting into the zone and just chasing those best times to continue for as long as possible. Reasonable sense of speed, 217 miles an hour. I think not, but you know. And you'd be expecting the Amstrad version to look exactly the same. And for some reason, it doesn't. Somehow the Amstrad version seems to have completely different graphics, and not completely different look and feel, but it feels like a different game. They've gone for this Mode 1 look, which has a slightly ugly colour scheme. And players of Burning Rubber on the GX4000 Amstrad CPC Pluses will go, yeah, this is Burning Rubber, isn't it? And it's kind of, this is the basis for Burning Rubber, which is a far better game. Burning Rubber has things like slipstreaming, wider circuits, you can touch the other cars and sparks will fly off, and as you race through the night, the colours in the sky change. But this plays really well. Sound is fairly horrible, but it's a decent racing game that only really gets surpassed, as I say, by Burning Rubber, and it has the nice cars crashing together thing in front of you that Burning Rubber also has. It's a decent racing game, it really is. I think people get put off it by just the ugly colour scheme. Over to the 64. And as we know, C64 racing games would go one of 2 ways. And yeah. Your speed, again, like Outrun, is depicted by flashing lines on the road. There appears to be weird sparkles all over the road and the kind of ground. Your car drives like it's on ice, and the cars just kind of skate around. There's no connection between the kind of what you're doing on the joystick and anything, really. There is a sense of speed, but to a point where it's completely pointless, where the occasional bits of scenery go flying past at about 1,000,000 miles an hour. Just not good enough. For an out-and-out racer, yeah, I'd go Spectrum or Amstrad, really, because they replicate the arcade. The C64 doesn't really know what it wants to be. All the games I've looked at so far today have been games that you sat down to play, or at least I did. There were upright versions as well. But Paperboy is a game that I remember was up at the side of the arcade, an upright cabinet, which I think I first saw on, there was a kids' TV quiz game that had it. I think we saw people play it. I'm going to start off with the Amstrad version, and it's another elite game. And it's looking fairly authentic. I mean, look at all this lovely colour. It moves fine here on the Amstrad. Nice split mode thing going on. And all good so far, but where's the sound? Any sound? And the answer is there is none. Apparently they didn't have any memory left for sound. I mean, not even a beep when you get a newspaper in the right place. I mean, that's bananas. I mean, having no memory left for a tune, I could understand. Having no memory left for any sound at all, that is pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. It sounds more like Elite couldn't be bothered to pay someone to do the sound, because surely you can drop a sprite here or there or something just to get a few beeps and things in. Which is a shame, because Paperboy on the Amstrad really gives you that arcade experience. It's really nice. It moves very well. It's all here, apart from the sound. It's completely inexplicable. C64 version does have sound. Graphics aren't as colourful, but again, it really helps that experience of trying to bring the arcade into the home, having some sound. There's some slightly odd and ugly colour choices, but I assume that is to do with keeping the sprites moving and the limitations on sprites on the 64. But it plays fine. It's a decent version of Paperboy. Instead, if you want a really bad version of Paperboy, try the BBC Micro version. Oh my goodness, it's terrible. I did think about including it in here today, but I just wanted to go Spectrum, Commodore, Amstrad. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. And I have reviewed these games before. I like it on the C64, I really do. Over to the Spectrum. So on the Specky, you've got a tiny sprite. It's all... well, it's not quite monochrome, is it? Because some things are different colours. 48k only game. It suffers from just being so monochromatic and your sprite being small. It does play okay. It's just a Spectrum only. You're not really going to hold your head up high against your C64 and Amstrad owning friends when you've got this. Although, as I say, try that BBC Micro version, because it's even uglier than this, and it's slow and horrible. The colour choice is just weird. You know, this black grass, black road, and light blue houses. It doesn't quite work for me. Again, it plays fine, but if you're looking for that kind of full arcade experience coming into the home, it just doesn't quite do it for me. So that's 5 arcade games that you can buy for your Spectrum, Commodore or Amstrad CPC. And how did they fare? Well, I'm still remarkably fond of the Amstrad version of Space Harrier. It's an approximation, and I can see why they've gone for the vector graphics, and it plays pretty well. The tune helps drive it along enormously. C64 version, I'm sorry, it's a mess. Spectrum version, I don't know why you'd bother, really. Outrun, historically important because it was a big game for Christmas '87, and US Gold rushed it out for all 3 systems. The Amstrad version it promises you so much on that loading screen. Look at it, it's gorgeous. And then you end up with a juddering mess with some nice graphics if you consider if they were just still, but it needed more time. Just not good enough. Spectrum version is better. If you turn up the speed in your emulator, it's even better still. It's just a shame, again, only one type of car per level. C64 version feels like a game that's not finished, really, which isn't a surprise. Buggy Boy, the C64 version is one of the best games on that platform of all time. Yes, it's not accurate to the arcade. It has tiny sprites. Doesn't matter. It's a terrific game. This is sometimes what you need to do. You can say, look, we can't replicate the arcade. Let's approximate it and make it a terrifically fun game, distill it, and that's what the C64 version of Buggy Boy is. Spectrum version, it's trying its best. Some people really rate this version. I'm afraid for me it's too juddery and slow. Amstrad, well, it's trying to be that C64 version, but they've taken shortcuts to keep the game moving fast, and as a result it just loses all those colours and just some of that fun of dodging around trying to collect the flags. WEC Lemans, WEC Lemans, it's a wonderful approximation of the arcade on the Spectrum and the Amstrad. Very nice. Can't really understand why they've got slightly different graphics, but, you know, doesn't really matter. It plays really well, and I like it, even if the Amstrad version is a little bit ugly at times with the colour scheme. Although that said, on the Amstrad, if you've got GX 4000 or plus, play Burning Rubber, because it's this, but turbo. C64 version, oh dear, why bother releasing this? Paperboy, oh, the Amstrad version could have been so special. When you saw the screenshots on the back of the pack, it's like, yes, this is going to be awesome. And indeed, it is, aside from that total lack of sound, which is inexcusable. And incidentally, the Amstrad graphics are so good, they ended up being reused on the Master System version. C64 graphics pale in comparison, although it has the advantage of better scrolling and a really nice soundtrack as you play the game. The Spectrum version, the graphics are tiny, it looks depressing and just doesn't quite capture that colourful spirit of the arcade. In hindsight, of course, it's ridiculous to expect a home computer to emulate far more powerful, sometimes 16-bit dual processor hardware from the arcade, costing thousands. But and I think in some of the cases we've seen today, especially things like WEC Lemans on the Spectrum and Amstrad, the programmers have done a really good job